Alright guys, welcome to another YouTube video. Okay, so in this video we'll be creating React.js. Yeah, creating a simplified version of it. Okay, but then before we commence this video, I want us to try to understand. Of course, some of you might have already done a research on how React.js actually works, and React.js and Next.js and all those other algorithms that, all those libraries that are similar to React, right? There's a certain principle they use for operating, right? I'm sure you must have heard about virtual DOM. Most of you must have done your research. Why those that haven't? Well, what the principle it works on is called the principle of virtual DOM, right? So in the virtual DOM, we have a virtual object. Most people call it virtual tree, right? Well, in representation in code, it's actually an object which holds all the information the DOM needs, every single information the DOM needs to render whatever it needs to render, right? And that's how it is. So whenever we want to make a change, we want to change the virtual DOM, and then we now compare it with what the old DOM, and then after doing that comparison we can now check out, okay, what really changed. So the specific things that changed, that's what we're not going to render. Like that's what, those things that change. Maybe if an attribute changed, we're going to render that attribute. If it's a child that changed, we render that child. So only specific changes that are going to be made, that's what we're going to do. So in that way we are stopping the browser from doing the work by itself, and we're going to do it by ourselves instead of having the browser do it, right? So one advantage it has, most of you must have known that the advantage it has is much more faster, in the sense that instead of the browser to figure out, okay, what really changed, okay, what happened. Sometimes you might want to change something. It might be like, okay, this dot inner HTML dot this, or this dot, I don't know how to see it. Well, there are some JavaScripts that people can write, and those those codes can be really tasking for the actual DOM to figure out, okay, what changed, and to render that change, right? But then with the React.js algorithm, we can actually figure out by ourselves, by creating our own method to discover what actually changed, and we can render it by ourselves, only that specific change. Okay, but sometimes if the DOM is to do it itself, it might change something that we really didn't need to change, something that wasn't supposed to change. It might actually change it, and that might be task, especially in large applications, right? So but then with the React.js algorithm and the library, we can actually specify what we want to change. Okay, so let's dive into the content of this tutorial. Okay, so the first thing we'll be doing is that we'll be creating a new file. So we'll name this file component.js. Right, so we're going to be writing all our components here. I'll just call it component.js, but we're going to write some code inside, just our main code. Okay, so we want to create another file which would call import.js. Okay, so we're going to create, before we do that, let's initialize our virtual application. Okay, so of course we're going to call a function, and then now let's create our import.js. So now with our import.js, we're going to write in most of the things we'll be needing. Okay, sorry. Okay, so then we also create an index.html. Of course, every React.js project must need an index.html file, whether you know it or not. But it always needs an index.html. Even if you're not writing HTML inside the file, but the browser needs HTML to actually render whatever it wants to render. Okay. All right. So we have to now create a root. Let's create a root div. Right. This is where we want to mount our application, the entire application. So we create a script and an src. We give it components.js, which is our main JavaScript file, and we give the type module, right? So we're going to tell it, okay, module, we're specifying that we're going to import and export. All right, so let's create our virtual application. But before we do that, we have to create our import create element from the import.js. We're going to create it a little while from now. So we're going to be importing create element. Okay, it's a function I'm going to import from import.js. So let's just write the stuff. Okay, then we would now go to import.js, and then we are going to now export. So I think I made a mistake here. It should be export. Okay, export. Okay, so then create elements, and then yeah, it's going to be a function as well, which will be returning something. Okay, so it's going to return an object, right, which is going to represent our tree, virtual tree. Okay, all right. So um, okay, so it's going to return an object. So, but we have to now get some parameters, which you know why it's exporting it. So it's a function that receives some parameters. So we're going to by default set. Okay, if you don't set a tag name, it's going to be null. Okay, an attribute is going to by default be an empty object. So that's why in case you don't set this stuff, it's going to give assign this. But I think maybe if you are crazy, you can set the tag name to by default be a div. Okay, but anyways, that doesn't matter. So the children is going to be an array. So go to return an object which just reference tag name. You know the property name is going to be tag name, and then the value is going to be referencing whatever our destruction, not destruction, sorry, whatever we're getting from the when we call it, right? So just see. But I believe if you are at least familiar with some sort of advanced JavaScript, object-oriented JavaScript, you should at least know what I'm doing here. As I said, this video unfortunately might not be for beginners, but at least you can learn the concept of what happens with React.js. Okay, now so we have done all those things, and then let's return our create element. Okay, so returning our create element now, so just pass in the parameters, the arguments. Okay, so we just set style and background and green, and I set a height 100 pixels and width 100 pixels. Okay, after doing all of this, so we now set the children, give it some children. Okay, so the children are going to give it I'll just write a text, hello world text. Okay, but you can give it, you can add a div, maybe if you advance it, right? So you can advance this if you want to. I've already created an advanced version of this. I'm just showing you guys how React actually works. Maybe later on I'll make a video on how the advanced version works. Okay, so okay, we just say hello world statement. All right, so now next thing we want to now do is to want to render. Okay, let's just print out the tree now. This presents the virtual tree. So print out this function to return the virtual tree. So let's open our browser. All right, just give us a second. Okay, but before we can open a browser, while we're opening a browser, let's create a render function. Okay, so render function is going to render our application. It's going to create the DOM version of the virtual tree. So you know the tree is not DOM actually. It's just an object, a lightweight object in memory. Okay, but then when we now render it, it's going to now be converted to a DOM. Okay. All right. So our browser is still loading. My PC is very slow. Okay, let's just give it some time, a little bit of time. Okay, so just wait a little bit, and then just a little more time. I think it's ready now, I believe. So let's check it out. So okay, yeah, let's reload this page. Okay, yes, so let's check our console, and then we want to see our virtual tree. Okay, now this is how React does its work. So this is the virtual tree. It has a tag name, attribute, and children. This is the lightweight representation of our tree, of our DOM actually. So then we now render it. So let's create a render function. Okay, so what we're going to now doing next is that. Okay, so I've actually created initialization of the render. Okay, so we're going to pass in an object here. Or you can give this any name actually. I just give it object because most likely it's going to be an object we're receiving. But in some cases you can receive a string, which represents a text node. Okay, but let's just take it as an object. All right. All right. So let's check the type of the object. Okay, let's check out what's actually entering. All right. So we're going to add it to our import here, render. You know, we've already added an export statement to it, so let's import it here so we can use the function. Okay, so this is actually how React works when you have your React DOM, like the actual DOM library. Okay, so that's, you now import your functions. You can also import your components and blah 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 blah. Okay, so now render. So we're going to render our virtual application. So let's print it on our console. Okay, there we go. It tells us that it's a type object. Of course, that's good. That's what we want to see. Okay, let me resize this. Okay, let me resize this. VS Code. Okay, and there we go. Okay, that's good now. So now let's start doing some work on our render function. Okay, all right, let's see. So thinking of the way I should do it. Okay, so first we have to create a, okay, for render function, because you see later, actually later I'll do it later on, but you see that sometimes we don't always have an object. Maybe sometimes you want to render a string, just a string text, just a text, right? So that way we want to create an object. Well, that's why I'm creating this external. It's another class again. It's going to return something for us. So I'm going to take in our elements here. All right, so okay, let's just go on. So we're going to create an element, which is going to be document.create element. So I think I'm going to change this to tag name actually. Okay, so we want to create that tag. That tag that is specified. So we just change this, the structure tag name from object, because this is going to be an object. Right? Mostly going to be an object. So the structure tag name, attributes, children, and other stuff. Okay. So we're going to create an element with specified tag name like they told us. Okay. So you probably specify a div. It's going to create a div for you. Okay, that's what we'll see here. Okay, that's good. Now, next thing probably is to add our attributes. Okay, we want to add the attributes that is specified. All right. But then there are different ways you can do this, but let me just use this way. So we're going to iterating through the attributes using object.keys. Object.keys should give us an array of all the keys in a specified object. Okay, so objects are attributes, which you know is, remember, it's an object. So okay, for it, this value is going to contain all its property names. Okay, the keys. So when I say this dot element dot what add set attributes, I believe. Okay, sorry, when I setting the attributes, we are going to just add, you could say dot style, but yeah, you could say dot style or whatsoever, but most likely you should use the set attribute. But in this case, I knew that it's only the style attribute I'm adding to it, so I just put it in this way. Okay, but naturally you should just use the set attributes to do it. So go now, go to get the value of that key. Okay, key and value pair. So you just get the value. So I've done with the attribute section. This is just a rough explanation of how React.js works. Okay, but I've already created an advanced module of this. I created it into a framework. Okay, but I'll show you guys how to do that one later. All right, so now we have done this. Now we have to go into our children. Okay. All right. Okay. So okay. All right. I wanted to add a parent here, but it's not going to be compulsory to add this parent. I don't think it's even compulsory. Is why I added it, because in the advanced module I created, this render is actually a recursive function which is going to be called inside of this children. So what I'm trying to say is that in the children you can also have other divs that you want to render inside the children. So you're now going to have to recall render again, and you have to pass in their parents so that you can now add them to their parents. You get my point? But in this case I'm not doing that, so we're not going to worry about the parents. I just wanted to add it there, so you just know that if you actually want to advance this, you have to do that. Okay, so when I say that what case type of val, if the val, that means if the child is actually a string, we don't want to create an element for a string. Give it just a plain text. We want to create a text node. Okay, so we're going to get const text should be equal to what document, or text node should be equal to what document dot create text node. Okay, create a text node and add the text to it. Right. Okay, so after doing that, the next thing we want to now do, we just pass in the text into it, which is val, if it's a string. Okay, so cost the log text node. So let's just see it to be sure it's working actually. But before we can see that, we have to pass the tell it to return, yes, return the create render application. So we have to instantiate the class. Okay, so new create render app since the class, and then pass in the object here. Okay, and then we now pass in dots. Okay, want just console or something. So let's pass in dot something. Well, we want to return the element in most cases, so we can just say dot element. That would do that one later actually. Okay, but now we just want to see the text node. Okay. Yeah, this is not necessary. Parent is not necessary, I believe. But it doesn't really matter. We can remove it if we want to. We can leave it. Okay. Anyways, let's just remove it. Alright, so now the next thing we want to now do is we wanted to print. Okay, we have to now call in the render function. I've not yet called it here. Okay, So we're going to pass in the virtual application. So I want to render a virtual. Yeah, there we go. So this is the string. We created a text node, and then you can see it's printed out the hello world for us. Okay, it has created the text node. That's good. So now the next thing we want to now do is append it to our element. Okay, so append child, and then we're appending child text node. Okay, so now let's consider the second case, which could be that okay dot element. Okay, so the second case is that if our val is not a string actually. Okay, well, okay, first let's return the element first. Okay, so then you see this is the element we just rendered. Now we just have to mount it. Okay, this is really good. So this is how React.js actually works. So you might not use the exact same names I'm using, but of course it's going to use similar names to it. But just understand how the principle of React.js, because most beginner programmers love to use frameworks. So I believe this should give you an explanation of what actually happens. So let's import our mount function. Of course we're not created it, but let's just set it as an import. So it gives an error. Okay, let's just create it. All right. So export const mount. So we're going to create our mount function. So this should now actually mount our application on that. No, initially we created the root element, so that element with the ID of root is what we're going to mount it on. Okay, so I'm going to tell you to set in a virtual DOM, and then the mountain, the app you're going to mount it. That's what this app means. So you want to mount your application. So we're going to say app.replace with. So we're going to replacing that app with what your virtual DOM. That's what it means. Okay, that's good. So we're going to now. Okay, maybe not now. Okay, next what we want to now is call our mount function. Okay, so we just call it mount, and pass our virtual DOM, vdom, and then we pass in our document. So let's reference that root element that we set in our HTML initially. Okay, get element by ID. So we're going to now get hashtag root elements. Just get the root since it's ID. Okay, so this is what we're going to just get. All right, that's good. So here we go. Ta-da! So it's mounted our application. That's really good, right? So this is how React.js works. So you look at that. You look at the fact that we didn't actually even write any single HTML. We didn't write. If I wanted to write HTML, I created some divs and stuff like that. I didn't really create anything in HTML. I just did all with JavaScript. Okay. So now next is going to be our diffusion algorithm. But that's going to be in our next video. Okay, this diffusion algorithm is a little bit complex, somehow complex actually. This is the main machine, like the main brain of React.js. Okay, this is what does the work, most of the work actually. Okay, unlike, of course, when it comes to states and all those things, maybe I won't do that one, but just showing you a basic example of React.js. Okay, so we will continue this in our next video. So I hope you would be there to watch it. So thank you for watching this video, and see you in my next video. Thank you. Right. Thank you for watching.